Maya Reyes had never been the kind of person to sit still. A rebellious spirit, a thirst for adventure, and a sense of being trapped in a world too small for her, these were the traits that defined her. At 17, she already knew she didn't want the predictable life her parents had envisioned for her. She wanted to see the stars, experience the unknown, and carve her own path in the universe. It was an obsession, one that had been with her since she was a little girl. The rumors had been circulating for years. The government had launched a covert mission to investigate an enormous, derelict alien spacecraft that had been discovered just beyond Earth's atmosphere. Its origins were unknown, and yet, it was unlike anything humanity had ever seen, too advanced, too alien. It was a massive ship, large enough to dwarf any known human craft, and its arrival had been nothing short of a mystery. Maya had heard the whispers. Her father, a former pilot who had been involved in the space program, would always warn her about the dangers of pursuing space exploration. But Maya wasn't about to listen to that. She had grown up staring at the sky every night, imagining what lay beyond the stars. So when she heard about a government mission that would send a team to explore the ship, Maya saw her opportunity. Her chance came when she managed to slip past the security systems and join the mission under a false identity, using her hacking skills to cover her tracks. The crew of scientists, engineers, and military personnel was tasked with studying the ship, but they were ill-prepared for the unforeseen dangers that lay ahead. As the mission's shuttle glided closer to the ship, Maya couldn't help but feel a mixture of awe and excitement. The ship loomed before them like a massive, sleeping titan, its surface glistening with an ethereal glow, casting an eerie reflection on the dark void of space. The ship's surface was smooth, almost metallic, with intricate patterns etched into its hull that defied any known human language. The shuttle docked on the ship's outer surface, and Maya's heart raced as she suited up in the standard exploration gear. The airlock hissed open, and the team stepped out into the alien ship's shadowy halls. The air was cool, almost sterile, and the silence was deafening. They had no idea what they were walking into. Maya felt a chill creep down her spine as the team ventured deeper into the labyrinth of corridors. The ship was vast, with towering walls covered in strange, glowing symbols. Some of the crew were taking samples, while others were documenting their findings. But Maya was more focused on one thing, a faint, pulsing light that seemed to call to her from the distance. Ignoring the cautious words of her fellow explorers, Maya followed the glow, her curiosity propelling her forward. She turned a corner, her footsteps echoing in the narrow hallway, and stumbled upon a large, sealed door. The light was coming from behind it. Maya hesitated for a moment. Her instincts screamed at her to turn back, but she couldn't. Not when she was so close to the unknown. She reached for the door's control panel and, with a few quick keystrokes, unlocked it. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a massive chamber. In the center of the room stood an object unlike anything she had ever seen, a suit of armor, tall and imposing, glowing with an otherworldly light. It was unlike any human technology. Its surface shimmered with an iridescent sheen, and Maya could feel an almost tangible energy pulsing from it. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stepped forward, drawn to the armor like a moth to a flame. She reached out, her fingers grazing the surface of the suit. The moment she touched it, a surge of energy coursed through her body, and the room seemed to shift. A voice echoed in her mind, a voice that wasn't her own. Human, chosen. Maya staggered back, her breath catching in her throat. The voice faded as quickly as it had appeared, but the effects on her body were immediate. She felt stronger, more alive, as if every cell in her body had been awakened. The others caught up to her, staring at the suit in awe. But it was Maya who felt the strange connection to it. Without thinking, she stepped closer and pulled the armor from its pedestal. It seemed to almost bend to her will, wrapping around her like a second skin. As the armor sealed itself around her, she felt an overwhelming surge of power flood her senses. Her vision sharpened, and she could hear every sound, every heartbeat, every movement within the ship. The world felt different. "Welcome," the voice echoed again, this time clearer, as if the ship itself was speaking to her. "You are the chosen one. Unstoppable." Maya didn't know what to make of the voice, or the power she now felt coursing through her. But she knew one thing for certain: her life had just changed forever. Maya's heart pounded as the alien armor fused to her body, the metallic surface pulsating with energy, adapting to her form in an almost eerie synchronicity. She felt as if she had been plugged into the very core of the ship itself, like some cosmic force was running through her veins. The weight of it didn't press down on her, it felt more like an extension of herself, as though she had always been destined to wear it. The voice, that same strange presence that had whispered in her mind, spoke again. "Unstoppable," it echoed, "but with power comes consequence." Maya shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. She was still trying to process everything that had just happened. She had touched an alien relic, and now she was connected to something vast and ancient. The others in the team hadn't noticed yet, too caught up in their own excitement at the discovery to realize the change that had already taken place in her. As her mind began to settle, the world around her seemed to sharpen, the ambient noises of the ship now distinct in her ears. She could hear the soft hum of the ship's systems, the low buzz of the lights above her, the far-off footsteps of the crew. Everything was crisp. Her senses were heightened. "Maya," called out Professor Elias Green, a seasoned scientist and the mission's lead. His voice echoed down the corridor. He stood a few paces away, watching her, his brow furrowed in concern. "Are you all right? What happened?" Maya blinked, her gaze drifting to him. For a moment, it felt like she could see every detail about him: his pulse, the slight flicker of his eye as he assessed her, his breath as it left his lungs. She could feel it all. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice steady but filled with an unfamiliar confidence. The words sounded foreign, even to her. "I think I just found something." She held up her hands, feeling the suit's responsive material shift and mold to her every movement. The energy thrumming through her body made her feel invincible, but there was also a twinge of fear. The armor was not simply protective, it was part of her now, and it didn't seem to want to leave. She couldn't explain it, but the connection was deep. Professor Green's concern only deepened as he stepped closer. "What did you find, Maya?" I'm not sure," she said, still trying to process. "But whatever it is, I think it's more than just armor. I can feel it, like it's alive." His eyes widened. "Alive? What do you mean by that?" Before Maya could answer, she felt something strange, something inside her mind, a ripple of energy that made her flinch. It was like the ship itself was reaching out to her, pushing at her thoughts. She suddenly felt flooded with visions, flashes of memories that weren't hers. The ship's past. The warriors who had worn this armor before her. Strange symbols flashed before her eyes, and ancient battles were fought across distant worlds. And then, an overwhelming sense of power that came at a cost. Her breath caught. The alien armor wasn't just a tool, it was a weapon. A weapon with a purpose. And it seemed to recognize her as its new bearer. "Is it trying to tell me something?" she whispered, her voice uncertain. Professor Green, who had been standing silently, seemed to sense her unease. "Maya, we need to remove that armor. It's too dangerous. We don't understand what it is, or what it could do to you." But Maya shook her head, a sudden surge of energy running through her. The helmet of the armor, which had been inactive, now lit up with intricate patterns, and a soft mechanical whirring sound filled the air. "I can't," she said, her voice stronger now. "It's part of me." Before Green could respond, a loud noise echoed from the corridor, followed by a burst of static from the communication systems. The lights flickered. "Captain Reynolds," came the voice of Lieutenant Mila Shaw, one of the ship's security officers. "We've got a problem. There's movement in the lower decks. Something is alive down here." Green's face went pale. "What do you mean, alive?" Mila's voice came through, frantic now. "I don't know. We're being attacked. We need backup." Maya's senses flared. She felt a surge of energy rush through her, and the voice in her head spoke again, this time clearer than before. "Defend." She didn't have time to think. The armor seemed to guide her actions, her instincts heightened to the point of perfection. Without warning, Maya turned toward the door that led to the lower decks. It opened automatically, as if the ship recognized her presence. Her new abilities, the heightened strength, speed, and reflexes, were overwhelming. The moment she stepped into the hallway, she could feel the atmosphere shift. Something was wrong. The crew members who had been with her just moments before were now rushing toward the lower levels. Professor Green tried to call after her, but Maya had already vanished into the dark corridors, her movements swift and fluid, like she had been trained for this very moment. As she descended deeper into the ship, the alien armor thrummed with energy. The echoes of the ship's history resonated in her mind, painting vivid pictures of its past. She saw what it had once been, a mighty vessel that had fought wars across galaxies, a ship that had been abandoned for reasons lost to time. She understood now, this ship, the armor, it was part of something larger, something ancient. Her steps grew more assured. She felt the pulse of the armor syncing with her heartbeat, as if the suit and her were one. The deeper she went into the belly of the ship, the more alive it felt, alive in a way that made her uneasy. At the lower decks, the crew had engaged with something large, hostile. Maya could hear the sounds of combat. The lights flickered again, and she saw them. A group of monstrous, humanoid creatures, their bodies covered in chitinous armor, emerged from the shadows. They moved with a predatory grace, their eyes glowing with a cold, alien intelligence. The crew had tried to fight back with firearms, but the bullets bounced harmlessly off their exoskeletal bodies. Maya didn't hesitate. The armor's voice whispered again, "Defend." It was almost like the armor had taken over, guiding her every move. She charged at the creatures, faster than any human could move, her enhanced speed blurring her form as she collided with the first one. Her fists, now imbued with the power of the suit, struck with bone-shattering force, and the creature crumpled to the floor with a sickening thud. The others turned toward her, their glowing eyes narrowing as they assessed the new threat. But Maya didn't hesitate. She was a whirlwind of power and precision, her body moving on instinct, her strikes landing with terrifying accuracy. One by one, the creatures fell before her, unable to keep up with her speed and strength. It wasn't long before the last one was down, its body twitching in the corridor as it lay motionless. Maya stood amidst the wreckage, breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling. The weight of what she had just done, the lives she had taken, settled on her like a heavy cloak. But there was no time for guilt. The ship still pulsed around her, urging her forward. She could feel the presence of the ship growing stronger, like a force calling her. The armor, alive and sentient, was guiding her. And somewhere deep inside, she understood, the true nature of the power she had unlocked was just beginning to reveal itself. As she turned toward the shadows of the corridor, the voice spoke again. "Unstoppable, Maya Reyes. But the journey has only just begun." Maya's breath came in shallow, rapid gasps as she surveyed the aftermath of the battle. The once terrifying alien creatures now lay scattered across the cold, metallic floor of the ship's lower decks, their chitinous bodies crumpled like broken puppets. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. The armor that enveloped her body seemed to hum in satisfaction, as if feeding on the power of her victory. The surge of energy was almost intoxicating. She had just fought off what could have been an entire squadron of armed soldiers, and the thought barely fazed her. Unstoppable. The word echoed in her mind, as if it were written in the very fabric of the alien suit. It was as if she was no longer Maya Reyes, the rebellious teen from Earth, but something more. A weapon. A force. She could feel the power coursing through her veins, each step she took sending waves of energy through the ship, synchronizing her movements with the ship's own pulse. But as the adrenaline began to fade, reality crept back in. The crew. Maya turned and ran back toward the command deck, her legs moving so swiftly that the hallway blurred around her. She could feel the ship shifting, almost like it was adjusting itself to accommodate her every move. The lights above flickered, and she could hear the distant chatter of her fellow explorers through the comms, their voices strained and anxious. "Professor Green, come in," Maya's voice cut through the air as she activated the communicator built into her helmet. The words felt strange coming from her mouth, as if she were hearing herself from a distance. I'm heading back. We need to regroup." "Maya." Green's voice crackled through the static. "What the hell happened down there? Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she replied quickly, her voice sharper than before. "There were creatures. I took care of it." The silence that followed was thick with disbelief. "What do you mean, you took care of it?" Green asked cautiously. "Maya, are you telling me you took on those things by yourself?" Maya hesitated for only a moment. It didn't seem real, even to her. "Yeah. And I'm not sure how, but it felt natural. Like the armor, helped me. You have to get back here, now. We need to analyze the situation. You're changing, Maya." She didn't need to hear those words to feel it. She could sense the armor's influence creeping deeper into her mind. It was subtle at first, like whispers at the edge of her thoughts. But now, it was becoming more demanding, more present, as if the ship's consciousness was trying to merge with hers. She reached the command deck just as Green's voice crackled through the comms again. "Maya, I can't stress enough how dangerous this is. You need to take off that suit and let us study it properly. It's too powerful, and we don't know what it might do to you in the long run." But Maya was already on the move. She entered the control room, the large, dimly lit space now filled with the quiet hum of the ship's machinery. The crew members were gathered around, their eyes wide with shock as they turned to her. Green stepped forward, his expression a mix of concern and awe. You look different," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Maya felt the weight of his gaze, but she couldn't stop. She could feel the power thrumming inside her, an almost unbearable pull that made her movements fluid, precise, like she was guided by something greater than herself. "I'm fine," she repeated, trying to calm the rising panic in her voice. "But we're not safe. There are more of them. Those creatures, they were just the beginning." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, and Maya could tell that doubt had already begun to settle in. They didn't understand. They couldn't. They hadn't felt the armor's power surge through them. They hadn't fought those alien monstrosities and emerged unscathed. The thought of taking the armor off felt foreign, almost wrong. Her body, her very being, now seemed to need it. But Green's warnings echoed in her mind. He was right. They didn't know what the consequences would be. But what if she could control it? What if she could use it to protect them all? Before Maya could respond, the ship's alarms blared, cutting through the tension. The lights flickered violently, and the command console flashed with warning symbols. A series of rapid beeps echoed through the room, signaling incoming threats. "Incoming vessel," the computer's mechanical voice stated. "Unidentified. Armed." Maya's mind raced. "More of them?" "No," Green said sharply. "This is something else. We're not alone out here." The door to the command deck slammed open, and Lieutenant Shaw rushed in, breathless. "There's a hostile ship in range. It's closing in fast. It's massive." Not human. Definitely not human. Maya felt her heartbeat quicken as she instinctively turned toward the viewport. In the distance, beyond the ship's hull, a massive shadow loomed, a colossal vessel, darker than the void itself, its surface jagged and marked with strange, angular designs. "It's them," Shaw said, her voice filled with disbelief. "The species we've encountered before. The ones that attacked us." Maya didn't wait for further orders. Her fingers moved, almost of their own accord, activating the ship's control systems. As if the armor had become one with the ship's technology, Maya could feel the ship's systems syncing with her thoughts. "Ready the defenses," Maya commanded. Her voice was calm, steady. The crew, stunned by her sudden change in demeanor, scrambled to follow her instructions. What are you doing?" Green demanded, his face etched with confusion and concern. "Maya, we can't fight them off. We need to retreat." "No," Maya said, her eyes narrowing as she focused on the alien ship now approaching. "We need to fight. We've got one shot at this." Her hands moved over the console with precision, activating the ship's weapons systems. She could hear the ship's guns powering up, and the faint hum of energy building in the air. The voice in her head, "Defend," rang louder now. Maya could feel the armor's energy surging, guiding her movements. She reached out and, without even thinking, sent a pulse of energy through the ship's core, directing it toward the enemy vessel. A burst of light erupted from the ship's weapons array, sending a powerful beam of energy hurtling toward the oncoming vessel. The impact was immediate, but the enemy ship didn't falter. It returned fire with deadly accuracy, causing the ship's hull to groan under the pressure. "We can't keep this up," Green shouted, his face pale. "Maya, this isn't what we came here for." But Maya didn't hear him. She could only focus on the battle now. Her senses were heightened to the point of overload, but it felt right. The power inside her surged, and she could feel the alien ship's weapons charging up again. She had to stop them. As the enemy vessel loomed closer, Maya knew what she had to do. She was the only one who could stand against this threat. The armor had chosen her for a reason. And it was time to prove that humanity had the strength to survive in the face of the unknown. "Get ready," Maya muttered under her breath. "This ends now." The sound of the enemy vessel's weapons charging up filled the command deck, sending a shiver down Maya's spine. Her hands gripped the console, her fingers almost instinctively tapping out the commands. The armor she wore thrummed with power, almost as if it were alive, responding to her every thought. But with every surge of energy, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something inside her was changing, something deep and irreversible. Outside, the enemy ship was closing in fast. The battle had only just begun, but already Maya could sense the massive, unfamiliar ship's presence. It felt cold, calculating. In many ways, it reminded her of the creatures she had fought in the lower decks, the same sense of predatory intelligence, but far more advanced, far more dangerous. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Maya called out, her voice firm and confident. The crew scrambled to execute the orders, but there was a tension in the air. They didn't know what to make of her newfound resolve. The same crew that had once looked to her for guidance now regarded her with a mix of awe and fear. Maya could feel their eyes on her, particularly Professor Green, who stood at the back of the room, his face drawn with concern. "Are you sure about this, Maya?" Green asked, his voice tense. "We don't even know who they are or what they want. You can't take on an entire fleet by yourself." His words should have been reassuring, but they only added weight to the burden she already felt. Maya wasn't the same person she was when she boarded this mission. The suit, this alien armor, it had transformed her in ways she couldn't fully understand. Her senses, her reflexes, her strength, they had all been enhanced beyond human limits. And while it felt empowering, Maya could feel the subtle pull of something darker beneath the surface. It was like the armor was whispering to her, urging her forward, pushing her to tap into the full potential of the power it offered. But at what cost? Maya turned to Green, her gaze sharp and unyielding. We don't have a choice. If we don't fight now, we'll lose everything. His eyes softened, but there was still fear in them. You're not the same, Maya. That armor, it's taking over. I can see it in you. You've changed. Maya's heart clenched at his words. She had changed. But was that such a bad thing? She wasn't the helpless teenager she had been just days ago. She wasn't scared anymore. She was ready to face whatever came next. Let me do this, she said softly, almost pleading. I'll protect us. I can handle it. Green didn't answer. He only nodded, the concern never leaving his face. But Maya could tell he didn't fully believe her, and part of her wondered if he was right. As the enemy ship grew larger in the viewport, Maya's mind sharpened. She could feel the energy of the alien ship thrumming beneath her feet, aligning with the pulse of her own heartbeat. The power inside her surged, and with it came an overwhelming urge to act, to destroy. The voices in her head were louder now, a constant hum urging her forward. Defend, the voice commanded, echoing through her thoughts like a battle cry. The feeling was intoxicating. A blinding flash of light erupted from the enemy ship, followed by a massive explosion that rocked the hull of their ship. Maya's reflexes were instant. She slammed her hand down on the control panel, sending a burst of energy from their ship's cannons in retaliation. The energy beam shot out, striking the enemy vessel with explosive force. But it didn't seem to faze them. The enemy ship returned fire with even more intensity. We can't keep up with this firepower. Shaw shouted from the tactical station. They're too strong. Maya gritted her teeth. She could feel the weight of the decision hanging over her. The more she pushed the ship's systems, the more she could feel the strain on her own body. The suit, this alien armor, was feeding off her, pulling more and more of her energy with every burst of power she unleashed. But she couldn't stop. She couldn't let the enemy win. In her mind, the voice grew louder, more insistent. You are unstoppable. You are power. The armor responded to her commands with a will of its own. It was as if she and the ship were no longer separate entities. The energy she channeled through her body linked with the ship's systems, amplifying her every move. Her body felt light, almost weightless, as if the weight of the world had been lifted from her shoulders. But as the battle raged on, Maya began to feel a strange pull, a disconnect between herself and the crew. She was losing herself in the power. Her emotions were clouded, her thoughts scattered. She had always prided herself on being a free spirit, someone who made her own choices. But now, it felt like she was being guided by something far more ancient than herself. The ship's consciousness was beginning to seep into her mind, its will becoming her own. She could hear it whispering to her. Defend. Protect. Destroy. She was becoming the weapon. Another blast from the enemy ship struck their hull, shaking the control room with violent force. Maya's grip tightened on the console. She could feel the armor responding, reacting to her anger, to her desperation. She reached out with her mind, guiding the ship's weapons with pinpoint precision, sending wave after wave of energy toward the enemy vessel. For a moment, it seemed like they were winning. The enemy ship was taking damage, its systems flickering. But Maya knew it wasn't enough. Not yet. She needed to push further. Maya. Green called out, his voice strained. You're pushing yourself too hard. You're losing control. But it was too late. Maya could feel it, the alien power surging through her, drowning out the voices of reason. Her body burned with energy. She was on the edge of something, and she couldn't stop now. With a final, desperate push, Maya channeled all the power of the suit and the ship's systems into a single, devastating blast. The energy erupted from the ship's weapons, a blinding beam of light that struck the enemy vessel with an intensity that seemed to shake the very fabric of space. The enemy ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, its pieces scattered across the vastness of space. For a moment, everything was still. Maya stood in the command center, her chest heaving, her body trembling from the sheer exertion. The battle was over. The enemy was gone. But Maya felt hollow. The victory didn't feel as sweet as she thought it would. "Is it over?" Shaw asked, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and fear. Maya nodded, her eyes distant. "For now." But as the adrenaline faded, Maya felt the weight of the armor press down on her. The voice in her head was quieter now, but it was still there, like a shadow in the back of her mind. "You are unstoppable." But at what cost? Maya knew she wasn't the same person she had been. The power, the influence of the alien armor, it had changed her. She had fought to protect the crew, to protect Earth. But what had she lost in the process? She looked at her hands, feeling the faint hum of the suit's power beneath her skin. Was this power worth the price? The ship was silent. The hum of its systems had faded into a dull background noise, like the whisper of a distant memory. The crew moved with a cautious quietness, their eyes lingering on Maya as she stood at the command center, staring out into the endless black of space. The enemy ship was no more, its wreckage floating in the void, a testament to the power she had unleashed. But the victory felt hollow in her chest, like an empty shell. Maya's fingers lightly traced the surface of the control panel before her, feeling the subtle pulse of energy beneath the metal. The armor, still firmly attached to her, thrummed quietly in response. She could feel its presence, almost as if it were alive, no longer an object, but an extension of her very being. The battle had ended, but the war within her was far from over. "Maya," Professor Green said, his voice breaking the stillness. He had been silent since the battle, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk." She turned to face him, her gaze meeting his eyes. He looked exhausted, as if the weight of their ordeal had aged him years in a matter of days. But his concern for her was clear, his eyes heavy with worry. "You're changing," Green continued softly. "You've already changed. That armor, it's not just something you wear. It's shaping you. I don't know what it's doing to you, but I can see it in your eyes. You're not the same person." Maya swallowed, the lump in her throat a bitter reminder of the conflict raging inside her. She knew he was right. She could feel it, this growing distance between herself and the rest of the crew. She was becoming something else, something far beyond human. The power coursing through her had its allure, but it came with a price she wasn't sure she was ready to pay. "I feel it," she admitted, her voice low. "The armor, it's inside me now. I can't explain it, but it's like I'm becoming it. I can feel the ship's pulse, its energy, in my body. I'm not just wearing it anymore. It's part of me." Green stepped closer, his expression softening. "Maya, we need to remove it. You don't know what it might do to you. The longer you keep it on, the more it's going to control you. I know you feel invincible, but that doesn't mean this is the right path." Maya shook her head, a surge of panic rising in her chest. "No, I can't. I can't take it off. If I do, what happens to me? Will I be weak again? What happens if we face another threat? I need this power. We need it." Green's eyes hardened. "We didn't come here to conquer or control, we came to explore, to understand. We can't let this thing, this suit, define us. You're stronger than this, Maya. You don't need it to be the hero." Her mind raced. The choice was before her, but it was the hardest decision she had ever faced. She had become a hero, a defender. The power, the invincibility, it was intoxicating. She had tasted victory and felt the rush of strength like she had never known before. But she also felt the weight of it, the creeping loss of herself as the armor seeped further into her soul. "You don't understand," Maya whispered, more to herself than to Green. "I need it. The power it's all-consuming. And it feels like it's what I was meant to have. I never asked for this, but now that it's here, I can't just let it go." "You're stronger than you think, Maya. You don't have to be the weapon. You can choose who you are." The words hit her like a thunderclap. She blinked, unsure of what to say. For the first time, she allowed herself to acknowledge what had been gnawing at her from the very beginning, the feeling that the power had been shaping her, bending her to its will, until it had become something beyond her control. Maya closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She could feel the weight of the armor pressing on her chest, the energy thrumming in her bones. But now, in the quiet aftermath of the battle, she saw the truth. She was a person first. Not the armor. Not the power. She was Maya Reyes. With a quiet resolve, Maya stepped back from the console and turned toward the hatch leading to the ship's lower levels. The crew watched her in silence, uncertain of her next move. She moved with purpose, her footsteps steady, but there was something different in the way she held herself. She wasn't running from the responsibility that came with the power. She was confronting it. Her hand hovered over the access panel to the armory bay. The same bay where she had first encountered the alien armor. Now, it felt like it was calling to her, urging her to come back. But Maya resisted. She wasn't afraid of the armor anymore. She had faced the enemy, she had proven herself. Now, it was time to prove something even greater. With a decisive movement, Maya reached up to the helmet of the armor. Her fingers trembled for a moment, but she steadied herself. She had faced fear before, but this felt different. This wasn't just about facing the enemy. It was about facing herself. The suit responded immediately, as if it sensed her hesitation, but Maya ignored the surge of power that tried to push her forward. She willed her fingers to unlock the helmet, and with a soft hiss, the seal released. For the first time in what felt like forever, Maya removed the helmet. The cool air of the ship's corridor brushed against her face, and she blinked in the light, feeling the weight lift from her shoulders. The voice that had been echoing in her mind was gone. For a moment, she simply stood there, the helmet in her hands, her heart racing. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, she placed the helmet on the ground, stepping back. "I choose who I am," she whispered. The sound of footsteps approached, and Maya turned to see Professor Green and the others, their faces a mix of relief and awe. Green's eyes softened as he looked at her, but there was no judgment in his gaze, only understanding. "You did it," he said quietly. "You made the right choice." Maya smiled faintly. It wasn't the same confident, invincible smile she had given just hours ago. But it was a smile that felt real, like the first step toward reclaiming herself. "I'm still me," she said, I needed to remember that." As she turned back to the crew, the decision felt right. The weight of the armor had been lifted. She had faced the ultimate test, against the creatures, against the armor, against herself, and she had come out the other side. It wasn't about being invincible. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about knowing who you were when the power was stripped away. And in that moment, Maya Reyes knew exactly who she was. A fighter. A protector. A person who would always choose to stand with others. No matter what came next.